Yet Jesus' real thoughts still resurrect like terrorists of truth, when people who know what he meant shake up the world and turn its values upside down before its last scrap of goodness is spent. For the last thing this vagabond poet from Palestine needed was to have the source of his inspiration paralyzed, to have it buried beneath a church-building program, or to have his philosophy of freedom imperialized. Churches try to trap Jesus in cold stone boxes every Sunday, claiming he belongs to them, then taking a collection. But free spirits don't exist to be abused by a repetitive racket, by unholy hierarchies and their ritualistic distractions. Just as the paradigm-shifting gems of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount can't be turned into a blueprint for a death-dealing Pentagon, nor a script for mass-murdering emperors to whom dominance and kill lists and drones give them triumphalist sensations. Jesus prophetically declared that Caesar's days were numbered, and that the emperor would end up without a home. Among the early Christians, the anarchic impulse was so strong, they'd find themselves blamed for the fall of Rome. Yet in a new Roman Empire, presidents use Christianity to bless their every move, and have tame priests to stand beside them peddling Rome's just war theories and blessing their master's signature on kill lists. Yet Jesus has still been a benign weapon of mass creation, whose fallouts lasted hundreds of years, casting an energizing glow on those warring against war, those exploding the state's phantom fears. Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti campaigned for labor rights and against America's involvement in war, so the authorities saw framing them for a crime they didn't commit could be the Italian anarchists' reward. On death row, Vanzetti held tight a copy of Renan's Life of Christ, which famously describes Jesus as an anarchist. Both men knew that their lawyer had been nobbled by the state, and Vanzetti compared him to Judas Iscariot. Vanzetti addressed the judge before sentence was passed. "I have fought for a better world. In all my life, I never killed anyone," he said in a firm voice. "I have never spilled a drop of blood." The first lawyer of the defense, Mr. Vai, has not defended me, has sold me for 30 bits of golden money, like Judas sold Jesus Christ. Their executions went ahead, but they electrified and then radicalized America. What good ever came out of Nazareth? People would jeer. Only someone we'd be wiser to resist. Yet that someone remains authority's problem child, with the most dangerous ideas that exist. Asked about Jesus, John Lennon would say that he was one of Christ's biggest fans, having once said, "The Beatles are bigger than Jesus Christ." He'd later say he meant taller, and that he wanted Christ to win. And there's been a long legacy of giving peace a chance, of there having been pacifist victories, where authoritarian regimes are disarmed and defeated by determinedly non-violent activists. The choice is no longer between violence and non-violence, Dr. King would urge his audience to understand. As he emphasized, it's either non-violence or non-existence when it comes to man's finding the promised land. Dr. King conquered his enemies with soul force, just as Emerson waged peace with a stare. Faced by Emerson's look like a loaded and leveled gun, US war lovers would scurry back to their lair. India's independence was a pacifist victory, and peaceniks brought Vietnam to an end. Europe's velvet revolutions were bloodless, showing wars dated and hard to defend. Jesus exposed a militaristic Rome as dysfunctional, so hated that only force could keep it alive. Naked and bleeding, he was able to discredit an empire, now buried in dust, while his words thrive. Rome's Emperor Diocletian declared himself God, and insisted on being addressed as "my Lord." But Christians would shout out, "Jesus outranks you," blunting the emperor's power with their words. Equally potent, when a peaceful protester in Tiananmen Square in 1989 stood in non-violent opposition to a column of tanks, the gesture was a key factor that led to the fall of the Soviet Empire and the Berlin Wall's demolition. Active non-violence may require more courage than just easing a bullet into a gun, but a disarming word or deed can change history, and with much less damage done. When one president came to Iraq to boast of his victory, he was brought down by 2 harmless throws. Shoes flung as a farewell kiss from the widows you made was an event showing the emperor had no clothes. To the Dalai Lama, Jesus was a bodhisattva. Be patient, tolerant, and compassionate. This is, you see, the real message in order to become a better human being. To Hugo Chavez, the revolutionary Venezuelan, whose assassination was called for by the US, he, Jesus, accompanied me in difficult times, in crucial moments. So Jesus Christ is no doubt a historical figure. He was someone who rebelled, an anti-imperialist guy. He confronted the Roman Empire, because who might think that Jesus was a capitalist? No, Judas was the capitalist, for taking the coins. Christ was a revolutionary. He confronted the religious hierarchies. He confronted the economic power of the time. He preferred death in the defense of his humanistic ideals, who fostered change. He is our Jesus Christ. How come you've never written about Jesus? An interviewer once asked Jack Kerouac. You've written about Buddha. Wasn't Jesus a great guy too? I've never written about Jesus, Kerouac retorted. All I write about is Jesus. Then he was asked, what's the difference between Jesus and Buddha? That's a very good question, Kerouac replied. There is no difference. To H.G. Wells, Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all history. Those who have renounced Christianity and attack it, said Dostoevsky, in their inmost being, they still follow the Christian ideal. Such remarks show Christ as inescapable, like a mountaintop on the horizon. You can walk round it, you can climb it, or tunnel through it, but you can't avoid it. It's there for all time, like it or not. In the dewescence of the year, wrote T.S. Eliot in Gerontion, came Christ the tiger, but a tiger whose habitat had no need to be cluttered up with stained glass, nor gilded candlesticks, nor confessional booths. A tiger who was just a beautiful idea, an anarcho-pacifist vegetarian tiger of a type new to natural history. When someone says, Bill Hicks the comedian is the psychedelic Jesus because he had the balls to tell the truth, it's the comparison with Jesus that gives the phrase its impact. For Christ can't be eliminated, even by an antichrist, whatever that may mean. And even if it could be proved that Jesus Christ never existed, his presence is still going to be here for atheists and believers alike. And even Che Guevara, who first of all would mimic Christ in his physical appearance, but who'd then sneer, in fact, if Christ himself stood in my way, I, like Nietzsche, would not hesitate to squish him like a worm. Even Che Guevara has had to play second fiddle to his rejected role model, having proved at the close of play unequal to the competition. Bertrand Russell, the atheist philosopher and rationalist paragon, was unafraid of the derisive smile with which wise cynics will greet my words. The thing I mean, please forgive me for mentioning it, is love, Christian love, or compassion. If you feel this, you have a motive for existence, a guide in action, a reason for courage, an imperative necessity for intellectual honesty. And Bernard Shaw, a socialist, said he'd no idea whether Jesus was God or not, but couldn't fault him as a political economist. Dawkins, the atheist, concedes Jesus was super nice, and that he rebelled against many aspects of Yahweh's vengeful nastiness. In this, Dawkins echoes Blake's view. Thinking as I do, Blake said, that the creator of this world is a very cruel being, and being a worshipper of Christ, I cannot help saying, the Son, oh, how unlike the Father. First, God Almighty comes with a thump on the head, then Jesus Christ comes with a balm to heal it.